What is up, soul fam? It's Sundial from Substance Over Style, and welcome to a new video. Okay, so I've got some myrrh on the go. So we're getting into the Christian spirit, not the Christmas spirit. I mean, we're coming into spring. It's such a beautiful day in London today. I'm so loving the vibe. It really feels like spring is here now. Where are we? We're still beginning of March, so yeah, I guess like March and February tend to be a little bit polarized with how they like to express their weather mood. So in February we might sometimes have a few spring-like days, and then we'll have other days where it's like torrential rain, or it's freezing cold, or it's just hail and grey skies. But March obviously tends to be a bit more consistent. I feel like April and May are probably like two of the best months in the UK. So if you're not from the UK and you're wanting to visit, I highly recommend you come and visit in, well, it starts getting nice in March. April and May are usually excellent. Sometimes we also have a good August and September, but it can be really hit and miss. I mean, you can never really predict. You can never really predict if you're going to get weather in London. If you're only here for like a week or two, it might be raining for the whole 2 weeks. So even in summer, it might be cold. So, but I do know some of my Indian friends, because it's so hot in India, or in a lot of parts of India, it can be really, really hot. They actually love the weather in the UK. And I did find that after living in the tropics and living in Asia for like 2-3 years when I was modelling, and then when I came back to live in London for like a little bit longer, like for a year at a time, I did actually really appreciate finally having like a winter. And look, you can see the sun is just peeking through. Wait, I'm just going to take a selfie. Oh, I need to do something about this light. I can't be taking the video light. Okay, that's better. Got the curtains closed. I should actually get a net curtain to put over this window, but I like being able to see the street. Okay, so what we're talking about today. So there were a couple of questions on my last video, not the last video, but the one before that, and I kind of wanted to answer them and talk about some of the things that kind of came up because I thought it was interesting. And then I'll do a little mini assumption update at the end of the video, so stay tuned to the end if that's what you find interesting. Yeah, it was about why you don't have your union yet. Let me just see, hang on, were there any good questions on the other one? Okay, so there were a couple of, so somebody asked, Joanne Arstall asked a couple of questions on Bentino Massaro, but I'm going to come back to that, talking about narcissism on the last video, and I do want to talk about that. But I'm going to answer the questions on union on the video, why you don't have your union yet. So the first one was Finland. Thank you for delving into this topic. I got a lot out of this video. I have a new relationship and I've discovered that my male partner isn't spiritual and doesn't believe in souls. Does this pattern come up often in your work with women seeking their divine union? Actually, yeah, it can come up, but not like, I feel like when I start working with a client one-on-one, generally they've kind of moved beyond that point. Where they're not really choosing people who are completely not open-minded at all. They'll be choosing people who are much more aligned. But there may be issues where the person might be spiritual, but that doesn't make them a healthy partner. They may even have narcissistic traits, okay? So this is something that you really, really need to watch for when you kind of move along in your journey, how to be much more discerning. And we're going to talk about this. This is also going to come up when I answer the question about Bentino and about narcissism and spiritual narcissism. That just because a man is spiritual, for example, doesn't mean that he's going to be a healthy partner, doesn't mean that he's heart-centered. Even if he does seem heart-centered, doesn't mean that he doesn't have narcissistic traits. Now, obviously, we can all have narcissistic traits, and if you're a person who's internally polarized, i.e. you've got just distortions in your masculine and your feminine energy, around, and you're not fully centered in your sovereignty, you may also display narcissistic traits as well. So it's not about like labeling the other person a narcissist or whatever, because when two people are internally polarized, it can be very difficult to ascertain who's being more codependent and who's being more narcissistic. So and the further along in your Hieros journey you go, it can become a little bit messy where it's not always clear. But this is where you've got to really start to trust the wisdom of your body. So for me personally, I would not date somebody who isn't open-minded. They don't have to think exactly like how I do. In fact, since being with my now partner, I would actually, in the past, I would always kind of look for guys who did think more like me, and that did not serve me, because I chose people, I was internally polarized, and I chose people who were also polarized. And when I met my now partner, I was still internally polarized, but maybe slightly less polarized, because I've been healing myself and clearing out some of those extreme distortions. So I was coming more into union, so the polarity was less within me. And he was holding the opposite pole. So this is what happens with attraction. You're attracted to somebody who's on the opposite pole. It's like an electromagnetism. So there's something in them that you need to integrate within the shadows of your consciousness. So you've got to ask yourself what it is, because every single person that you get into a relationship, every single person that you have an interaction with, or every single person that you're drawn to has got a message for you. And he might not be your guy, but he might also be your guy. You've just got to tune into how you feel. So when I met my guy, who I'm with now, there were quite a few areas where we didn't agree, where we didn't see things the same way. And it triggered me. Now, when I say listen to your body, like when you're interacting with a man and what it's telling you, you've got to learn to be able to discern the difference between a trigger and a gut feeling that this is a red flag, or that things might not work out. And now, obviously, it has to do with your belief systems around how, like, are you fatalistic? Are you the kind of person that's always like looking for problems, and to basically mirror back to you your beliefs that nothing ever works out? Or do you have the belief that everything's always working out for you, even if this relationship doesn't work out, it's always going to serve your highest good? So for me, I found myself getting triggered by this guy, but I was still attracted to him, and my body still wanted him, and still wanted to seek him out, and still wanted to interact with him and have, exchanges with him. We still wanted to hang out with him, talk to him, go on dates with him, have sex with him. So, but he would trigger me in certain things. And what that did was the fact that he would hold his position, and he wouldn't allow me to like dominate him with my worldview. He would just respectfully be like, yeah, okay, that's great. He was open to my opinion, but he had his own opinion. And it would kind of trigger me, but it brought me back into balance, and it opened me up. And you've got to ask yourself, what is this guy bringing to you? What is it that you actually like about him? And just follow the path of, what your body is telling you. Now, not saying that our bodies always take us in the take us in the correct direction, because sometimes, when we've got traumas and inversions, our bodies keep on choosing things that re-traumatize us, because we stay looping in false timelines. So when I work with one-on-one clients, we actually clear these false timelines, because we go back to the origin wound, and then we'll go to several different points along that timeline and collapse it out and bring you back into your highest timeline. So you've got to ask yourself whether you're looping in a false timeline, or whether you're aligned onto your highest timeline, and what is this guy showing you. So it's not about like, whether a guy's spiritual or not. Like, personally, I don't know, like, the whole thing about, spirituality can mean many different things to many different people. So you've got to ask yourself, doesn't believe in souls. I mean, if he's not, personally, if a guy's not spiritual at all, I can't really go there if he's not going to be open-minded to my views, because there's so much of, I'm such a spiritual person, and such a, deep diver, and such a truth seeker, that if I was with someone who was very who was very narrow-minded and closed-minded to those things, I would really struggle with that. So I like that my partner is open-minded. He's open-minded to all the stuff, but he doesn't like feel the need to he doesn't preoccupy himself with like studying things all the time like I do. He's very much about his work and his mission, which is different to mine. Okay, it's not like he's not about like the ascension and things like that. He's very, very grounded. And for me, because I can be a bit of a space cadet, I need that. So I need somebody who's very in this world and help, because he's helped balance a lot of my distortions and where I was being a bit too airy-fairy. He's really helped to ground my energy in so many ways. I've talked about it in previous videos, but just tune into your body and see how do you feel around this man, and if it's something that you want to pursue, because nobody can tell you that, but nobody can give you rules of whether you should engage with this person or that person, or these people are like this. You know, you've got to tune into how your body and how you feel around that person. Yeah. Okay, so the next one. Okay. So this one was from Pierre Camus, and this was really interesting, this comment that he left, and it kind of made me feel a lot of conflicting things, so I wanted to talk about it. So he said, this is a really interesting channel. You have a very intuitive and spiritual understanding of life, yet you combine it with organized rigor and clarity. Interesting. That's the Hieros, intuitive plus knowledge, and it brings forward, you know, that it's called the Trivium. Look it up, Trivium. That came up in a one-on-one session that I did with a client this week. Mark Passio teaches the Trivium really, really well. So go and study that if people are really, really interested in kind of getting clarity on the truth. Maybe you could help provide some insight to demystify one of the most confusing and confounding mysteries to me, as well as to many other male Homo sapiens out there. Wait, hang on, I missed something. Okay, sorry, let me start again, scratch that. He goes, I understand your channel is not really related to the following question. However, I figured it wouldn't hurt to try and ask. Maybe you could help provide some insight to demystify one of the most confusing and confounding mysteries to me, as well as to many other male Homo sapiens out there, the rocket science of female sexuality. Now, I thought that was really interesting that he said that, because I've talked about female sexuality a lot on this channel. I mean, that's kind of what this channel is about. Like, you know, we talk about divine feminine awakening, about Hieros, about ascension, you know, all of those things, about Kundalini. All of those things are to do quite, you know, they have a lot to do with sexuality. Okay, maybe if you're a lay person, you might not realize that. And, you know, potentially he didn't realize that. But it just kind of made me feel a bit like, has he not watched any other videos except for that video? So it made me feel like he's kind of saying, oh, it's a really interesting channel, but he's only watched one video. And then came in asking loads of questions when he hasn't spent the time watching videos where those questions might have already been answered. And I'll talk about that again a little bit more. He goes, if you could please touch on any of the questions you think might be educational and useful, in video or otherwise, whatever is easier for you. Okay, and then he's asked like a bunch of questions. He's asked like 10, no, it's 5 questions. Okay, I thought it was maybe 10. But I'll start off saying straight up, what women, I feel like I speak for, like, obviously he knows that, like, women are all different, and because he said that, he goes, I do understand that women differ from one another, as well as throughout the month it may vary. Not just throughout the month, but also depending on a woman's embodiment, where she is in her healing journey, and also just her natural essence and her soul signature, because every woman has a unique blend of different templates, and, you know, whether her masculine and how her masculine and her feminine energy expresses itself. It's not just about traumas and wounding and distortions. It's also some women naturally have a more feminine essence, and some women naturally have a more masculine essence. And then within that, there's different types of feminine archetypes and masculine archetypes that women hold more strongly than others. So we are all different with that. But I will say, me personally, and I think I speak for a lot of women when I say this, we don't like it when a man comes and doesn't invest any time into getting to know us and then tries to get something from us. And that's what I feel like, if this guy's having issues with, you know, connecting with women, it might be because I'm getting this vibe from him that he's not spent any time watching my channel. He doesn't know. First, he's asking questions that he believes might not even be related to the concept of the channel, which, you know, again, if I didn't talk about female sexuality, I would be totally turned off by that. But the fact that I do talk about female sexuality, I like the fact that he asked the questions. But it's kind of made me feel like, it's like if somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I can tell that you're not really into fashion, but can you tell me what, and then asks you a question about fashion. And maybe you are into fashion, but they've looked at you and judged that you're not a person that's into fashion would be kind of offensive. So the fact that he thinks that my channel is not talking about sexuality, even though we do talk about sexuality here, shows me that he hasn't invested any time in watching any of the videos before he's come and asked like 5 questions. So it kind of has this like entitled energy, and that's totally repulsive to a lot of women. For me, I found it like, it felt weird in my body to read these questions, even though I like the questions. And if they had all come from different people, I would have felt amazing about it. But because they all came from one person who hadn't spent the time to get to know the channel and what the channel was about, it felt, you know, like disharmonious in my body, and I didn't like it. So, you know, if you're talking to a woman, get to know her before you start trying to get anything from her. Well, whatever that is, whether it's her time, her validation, her energy, her sexuality, or just some information from her. Like, don't just start asking her like loads and loads of personal questions about herself when you haven't kind of invested any time to just have like, you know, because to get to those deeper layers, I find some men can be really aggressive with this, where they'll start asking really personal questions when they haven't, you know, just taken the time to slowly unfurl just your emotional landscape, because it's kind of feels a bit rapey. Women do this to men a lot as well. Like, let's not say that it's just men doing this to women. Women will do this to men where they'll try and get them to open up emotionally. It's extremely vulnerable for a man to open up emotionally, and it feels just as entitled. If you're dating and getting to know a man and you start feeling entitled to his vulnerability and to his inner emotional landscape, that feels quite rapey, emotionally rapey to a man. So as a woman, don't do that. Give him the space to open up in his own time. You can, of course, let him, you can be a little bit like letting him know that you want to kind of get in there, just like how, you know, when you're getting to know a man and he's showing you that he desires you as a woman, it can be quite nice as well and enticing. But don't be pushy, and respect, you know, wherever his boundaries are. Okay, so let's go on to the questions now that I've got that out of the way. And look, don't take this the wrong way. Like, I hope I'm not being harsh. Well, I know I am being a bit harsh, but I felt like I really needed to say that because it's important. Okay, so do women crave as intensely and viscerally to look at and touch the male body, example, forearms, shoulders, hands, muscles, etc., in the same manner that we may hunger for the female body? Not in the same way, but yes, we do. So obviously the way that men like to look at women is kind of like, it's more as like, you know, the woman being a bit more submissive and maybe, you know, like languishing about in certain submissive poses, or doing things that are, you know, performing actions that are very, you know, feminine, like nurturing, self-care. You know, all of those things are very sensual and erotic to the male gaze. For us as women, I fucking love looking at my man. He's a really attractive person. And for me, like, what really gets me is like, you know, like watching him like lift heavy objects, or like, you know, like when you see a man, obviously one who looks good, but like shirtless and sweaty and doing yard work. We love that. Yes, we do. So yeah, and you know, he already knows. This is what I found confusing about this, because he already knows, because he said, for example, forearms, shoulders, hands, muscles. We love all of that stuff because it implies the strength and protection. That's how we like to feel with a man. When a woman sees a man in a well-tailored suit, does it trigger sexual longing in the same way a female showing skin sexually might cause in men? For some women, yes. Okay, I know I've got some friends who they love nothing more than to see a man in a well-tailored suit. For me personally, it actually does nothing for me unless it's my man. like all the guys that I've dated in the past don't really wear suits that much. They tend not to be corporate types. But I know that women, particularly hypergamous women, love a man in a tailored suit because it makes him look like he has a job. And, you know, women love men who can provide, you know, especially women who are more feminine energy. For me, not so much. I like a man who's like, looks a bit more like artsy, a bit more bohemian, you know, just has that little bit of femininity. Now that I've been, you know, doing so much shadow work and integration around my feminine energy, I do like a man who's a bit more masculine, but somebody who looks a bit more like rugged and outdoorsy and stuff like that. So, you know, like, I mean, so my man just moved from, he just moved from Bali, where he was looking like a surfer all the time. And now he is in the States, and he's in Denver, where it's in Colorado, where it's like winter. So he's wearing like loads of like jumpers and like big coats and stuff. And he just looks like a lumberjack or like a Viking. So I love that kind of like rugged, outdoorsy kind of look for me personally, because I'm a bit more... like, I don't like guys who are too matrixy. Y'all know how I am, okay? So if a guy is wearing a well-tailored suit, I'm going to think that he has like a 9-to-5 job and he's chained to a desk. And for me, I like a guy who's a bit more free-spirited, who's a bit more, just a bit more entrepreneurial. So for me, it's, again, so this is where, you know, women are different. So, you know, for these questions is kind of like, it doesn't really, just be yourself, you know, because with the, especially if you're on a Hieros Gamos path, it's all about you being true to your deepest essence and what God has put you on this planet for. So the truer you are to yourself, the more you will start to magnetize feminine energy towards you. And I've experienced this with my male clients that I do field work for. The more I align them with their highest timeline and what, you know, their mission and their purpose and what God has put them here to do, they start to notice women actually starting to become very, very magnetized to their energy, because they're not, their energy isn't going all over the place and trying to grab at women. It's centrally aligned and, you know, connected directly to source, to creator. And that starts to pull women who are actually much more aligned to them in higher and higher, connecting to higher and higher chakras. So it's not so much like that base desire that you get when you're, you know, not fully embodied and not on your highest timeline. Okay. Is sexual excitement binary? Similar to us men, we are either not thinking about sexual excitement, or we have been triggered and now have to consciously address it, either by squashing it, or does it have many stages like 1 to 10 ladder and all day slow simmer? I mean, this question shows that he already knows the answer. So I don't even, it's weird because, like, yeah, I wanted to talk about this because he's raised really, really good points, and I wanted to bring them in a video because they're super valuable to everyone. But he already knows, like, yeah, no, it's not binary. Like, it's a slow day simmer. Not even just a slow day simmer. It can start simmering over the course of a whole week. That's why women are so attracted to consistency, because when again, it comes down to our hormones as well. Like with testosterone, it's kind of, I think Alison Armstrong, was it Alison Armstrong, or was it, might have been John Gray, who was talking about like the sieve versus like a steel, you know, metal bowl with like no holes in it. So testosterone is like a steel metal bowl that when you put things into it, nothing escapes. Whereas a woman, her brain or like her nervous system, because of the estrogen, is more like a colander. So you put words of affirmation into the steel bowl, you tell a man you love him, he's going to hold on to that probably for the rest of his life, thinking that you're still in love with him. Whereas women, we need that constant reinforcement. So that whole like sexual energy can start to build over the course of a whole week, which is why we love it. If you want to take us out on a Friday, arrange that day on a Monday, and all week we will start getting excited about it. We'll go get our nails done, we'll get our hair done, we'll buy a new lingerie, we'll buy a new outfit, and all of that is foreplay to us, because it's basically us adorning the temple through which the goddess is going to awaken during the sex act, if you're lucky and you actually get there with her. But yeah, it's all like, it's a slow simmer, and it obviously takes a lot longer for a woman, but the benefit is it doesn't have to start, it shouldn't be starting in the bedroom. Like the slow simmer, the foreplay does not start in the bedroom. It starts long before that with like words of affirmation and like, let's plan like where we're going, what we're doing, I'm so excited to take you there, and all of those things. And she's going to start doing, you know, all those things that make her feel like a goddess. Okay, so for females, the primary motivation for sexual content is born out of emotional intimacy and mental connection, B, curiosity, adventure and pleasure, C, desire for satiation. It's actually a lot more than that, and historically it's been like maybe even none of those, but maybe even just survival. Okay, because women need men to survive and have historically required men to survive for protection and provision. Now, obviously, with women integrating their masculine on like a collective level, women don't really require men so much for provision as much anymore, but we kind of do, because women are still mothers, and having to do the role of motherhood and also the more fatherly role of provision is literally, it's causing women to just burn out and just end up completely frazzled and resentful and all of that stuff. So if you find that a woman is not sexually opening up to you, it might be because she's literally being a mother and a father, and she's completely burnt out and frazzled. So actually taking the time to step in and be, you know, take some of the load off her shoulders will actually help her move more into her feminine energy and start to kind of open up more sexually. But I would say that that's a primary motivation for sexual contact is, you know, not even, I mean, it's not so much as, I think it is a survival thing. Because when we don't have a man, like, you know, either you replace your masculine, but with your own masculine energy, and that's that whole I don't need a man kind of thing that a lot of women nowadays think is really empowered. And they just rather do everything themselves and just burn out rather than have somebody come in and help them and make their lives easier. But I would say, definitely if a woman has kind of moved up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs where all her basic survival stuff is taken care of, definitely emotional intimacy and mental connection, I would say, is definitely top of the list. Desire for satiation is important, don't get me wrong. There are far too many women out there that are not being sated, and if a woman is not being sated and she's not having regular orgasms, like when I say regular orgasms, I mean like at least one per session, okay? Because women have far greater orgasmic capacity than men, and if a woman is not coming at least once in a session, if not 2, 3, you know, up to 10 times, then she's probably not going to want to do it as much as the male partner in her relationship. So, you know, and I'm not saying it's just a men's fault. Like, we do know that there are a lot of men out there who are useless and selfish and don't really know how to do it, and just, you know, just use porn, and that's where they get their sexual education from, and haven't learned how to not just learn about female anatomy, but also learn how to connect with their women emotionally, because it's not just about female anatomy, it's much more about the emotional connection, because every woman's physiology is completely different in terms of what she likes in bed, because, you know, the clitoral network is completely unique to every woman, and how it connects to your central nervous system and all the way up to the pineal gland. It's like a fingerprint. It's completely unique. So every woman likes different stuff in bed. But also sex is very emotional and very mental as well. So if a woman is not feeling emotionally connected to you, she's going to struggle to have those full body orgasms that are required for kind of being multi-orgasmic. Okay, what actions do you notice do not seem to trigger sexual excitement in us men, but for women they seem to? Compliments, attention, tenderness, vulnerable conversation. I mean, he already knows. I don't know why he's left this comment. Is it just to like show that he already knows the answer to this stuff? Because he's put it there. Like, compliments, attention, tenderness, vulnerable conversation obviously gets, you know, women sexually excited if they're into you. If they're not into you, then nothing's really going to make them sexually excited. They have to kind of be, definitely a woman can be not into a guy and then become more into him, but, you know, depending on how he behaves. it depends on what that woman is. Again, it's unique to every woman, like what she's looking for in a person. It's usually something that she's missing in her own life, and that's what is, you know, it's the same with, you know, when men are attracted to women. It's because there's, you know, something just different about the person and something that you want to be yourself. You know, they're representing that shadow aspect. I'm not saying it's the only thing that goes on with attraction. You know, attraction is kind of a multi-layered thing. But yeah, from somebody that she is, let's say already attracted to, and, you know, is her physical type and all of that stuff, compliments, attention, tenderness, and vulnerable conversation are all things that trigger sexual excitement in women. And just knowing that he wants to, like, for me, okay, it's like, if a man shows that he wants to, like, do things for me, like that's because, again, everybody has a different love language. If a guy shows me that he wants to do something for me, he wants to help me in some way, he wants to provide some value, then I start to, you know, but again, I have to be into him. If I'm not into him, then he can do that till the cows come home, I'll take it. And this is where obviously men have a lot of issues with women and are quite resentful for women, in the fact that they'll just take and take and take, even if they're not, like, so don't go offering your services or favors or provision to a woman who doesn't seem to be reciprocating that attention that you're giving her in some way. Like if she's taking, you know, too long to answer your messages and things like that, she's probably not into you. So if you're offering to do things for her or send her money or just whatever, and she's not, you know, she'll take it, and she might even, you know, make you think that you have a chance. But, you know, there's a way to kind of test women's level of attraction with you, and it's whether she'll reciprocate certain things. But again, this is like, you can't, when you try and be too strategic about these things, I think that it ends up causing a lot of issues where you are going to get burnt because you're trying to be a certain thing. I think as a man, if a man is having issues with women, he needs to primarily look at where he is with his provision and where he is in terms of his mission and his purpose in the world. Once those things should be of top priority to the masculine. And I'm not just talking about men in general. Women should also get this straight within their own masculine energy, so that, because if you're doing all the feminine energy in the world, you know, there's so many feminine energy coaches now teaching women how to kind of be more feminine and how to kind of embrace their feminine energy. You can do all the feminine energy in the world, and you can do all the feminine energy work in the world, but if you haven't worked on your masculine, that is the architecture that holds up that, you know, divine feminine goddess, Holy Spirit that moves through you, the Sophia, then all of that stuff is just going to come crashing down, because, you know, you're just going to, you know, it's just, I see a lot of women kind of doing so much feminine energy work when they're already quite in their feminine energy already. They're, you know, have too much feminine energy and their masculine is underdeveloped, and then they start doing even more feminine energy work, and it's just like, girl, no, you need to work on your masculine. And then obviously some women are too in their masculine, and then yes, they definitely do need to work on their feminine. But, you know, when they're too in their masculine is out of balance. So they also need to do masculine energy work, but they need to bring the masculine towards the healthy masculine or the divine masculine, and be more intentional with their masculine energy. So not just about, you know, making money and like being organized. It's about like, you know, what's your mission here? Like your divine mission. Are you doing what God really put you on this planet for? You know, have you got that singular vision that's heart-centered, where you're, you know, where you're in loving service to the world, and being, you know, your provision comes from that. So it's a whole other thing, you know, it's not this distorted masculine energy. Okay. So let's go to the question about Bentino. I don't know if I'm going to read out the whole thing because it was quite a big comment. Maybe I will. Maybe I will, because we've got time. Okay, she said, I followed Bentino quite consistently and seriously consider him one of the better teachers of this material, quite empowering, etc. But of course I wasn't there for his retreats. I have never caught a whiff of this. He's all about pushing your own knowing and sovereignty. Yeah, that's fine. He might say those things, but it seems like in practice that's not what happened from what the people who were at the retreat said. But look, I understand that like there were also issues to do with, and you know, you guys need to listen to the podcast on A Little Bit Culty where they called him out, and I'll post a link in the description box below. There was one particular instance where one of the girls was talking about he kind of got her to strip in front of, you know, at some party that they were having at the retreat. And, you know, she did it because she was trying to embody this alter ego that he was encouraging her to embody. And she was, you know, upset when she was retelling the story. And she was just like, I was just hoping that one of the other girls would say something. But it's not and look, I'm not victim blaming, but how are other people supposed to know what's going on within your body if you don't even know? Like, how are people supposed to know that that's not what you want to do? Like, if somebody's taking off their clothes and stripping and being a bit sexual, it's not for me to tell them to put their clothes on and like try and shame them for their behavior. You know, that if they want to do that, and if that kind of environment supports that kind of behavior, it's up to that person. And so she did it willingly. When she was telling the story, there was no point at which she said, I'm not comfortable with this, or I don't want to do this, and he was pushy. So I get what she's saying. Okay, but again, I wasn't there. It sounds a bit predatory to me, but it also sounds like the person who's, you know, now coming out saying that she's a victim had boundary issues. So, you know, when that happens, like I've looked at some of the situations where I've been victimized and where I felt like I was violated. And yes, some of them I really was, where I did say no and I don't want to do this, and people were pushy, you know, whether it's something like a sexual interaction or whether it's something at work. You know, I've talked about this extensively in previous videos where I've talked about the boundary issues in the modeling industry, which used to be absolutely appalling, where you would tell clients that, you know, you're not comfortable with XYZ, and they would coerce you into doing things that you're not comfortable with. And since the Me Too movement, that things have got a lot better with that. So yeah, I answered, I recommend you listen to the podcast on, oh, I didn't finish the comment. She goes, I know what trolls and haters can do to spiritual teachers and influencers. I work for a few of them, and it's really sickening when you actually know them personally. So I'll wait to see. He released a statement that I thought was appropriate. Just my 2 cents. I haven't read that statement though, to be honest. I'll maybe go look. And she goes, his cigar thing is a little douchey, but I don't know about cult. It's always the first thing people say. Like, I get that. And look, with the podcast on A Little Bit Culty, when they're asking, like, how did you get involved in a cult? They've all said nobody joins a cult. Nobody willingly joins a cult. They join a good thing. So, you know, I don't think that the people at his retreats would say that they were part of a cult. It's just, you know, it starts to become a little bit culty when people start to adhere too much to the belief systems that are taught by the leader, to the point where it becomes dogmatic and dissenting opinion is not allowed. So, you know, if you're in a situation like that, you know, let's say you're in somebody's container, somebody's Facebook group or whatever, and it starts to become dogmatic to the point where you can't have different conflicting opinions, then maybe, you know, you want to think about whether that community is showing signs of that. And I do remember that the Raw Till 4 community, when I don't know if you guys, you know, those of you who've been with me for a long time will remember that I started making videos, you know, around the time that I started trying the Raw Till 4 lifestyle, which is a high raw fruitarian plant-based lifestyle, and it was kind of popularized by Freely the Banana Girl and Durian Rider, and I do think that their community started to get quite culty. I don't think that that's Freely's fault, but I do blame Durian Rider, and I do think that he's a narcissist. I think Freely can be a little bit dogmatic with her views as well, but, you know, I respect her. I think, you know, I like that she's ballsy and she says exactly what she thinks, but she doesn't, you know, it's also incumbent upon you to disagree if you want to. And the problem with cults is not so much the leaders, it's the followers and the bystanders. That's what I think anyway. So I said, anyway, I recommend you listen to the podcast on A Little Bit Culty. It doesn't seem that way from their testimony, but like I always say and have said in this video with narc-codependent dynamics, there is a dance. So yeah, you know, like if you're coming out of like a narcissistic, a codependent situation, so crucial in your healing is going to be taking responsibility. I've said this before, I'll keep saying it. I know that some people might find it controversial, but I've been there, and I only got out of it when I started to reclaim my own power, and when I started to take responsibility for what I was co-creating. Okay, so she goes, yes, indeed, a dance for sure, and I'm sure he's got some narc in him. Don't we all? Don't we all? A lot of the teachers I follow do. I've been pondering this a lot, actually. Narcs are incredible manifestors because their reality is the only one, so they don't have the doubts and plan Bs that trip us mere mortals in holding the frequency. Yeah, I mean, I do think that you should be able to have the ability to self-reflect and take criticism. And people that don't, and people that gaslight, the people that kind of come to them with their concerns, that's what makes the difference between somebody who just has a few narcissistic traits like any normal person and an actual full-blown NPD. What if the teachers are teaching these principles but aren't walking them out in their life? Does it matter if they have the gift to teach this material and it helps people? Yes, I think it does, because that person's a total hypocrite and a fraud, and I don't think that people should be teaching things that they haven't embodied. And this is the thing, because when you go to a teacher, especially to work, you know, you can learn stuff till the cows come home from watching someone's videos, but if you actually want to study one-on-one with this person, when the person has not fully embodied the teachings, that's where you're going to end up with distortions, and that person is actually not going to be able to help the individuals that come to them with specific cases. And it's also like, how are they even, if they've not embodied it, there's going to be distortions in what they're teaching. There's 100% going to be distortions because they're not fully aligned. The teaching doesn't come from them. They're just basically recycling and regurgitating the stuff that they heard somewhere else. This is why, with the training that I've done with Emily Harris, I actually don't talk about a lot of the stuff that she taught and trained us how to do in my videos, and even in my work with clients. Like, you know, a lot of the tools that she's given me, I don't even bring in because I haven't yet fully embodied. I'll bring in obviously what's relevant to help them with their situation, and once I've practiced it enough times, then I'll start to talk about it in videos. Because until I have myself experienced something and used it in my own work or embodied it within my own life, I have no place to teach it, okay? That's how I believe that, you know, we should be operating. But unfortunately, there's too many people jumping on the spiritual teacher bandwagon, teaching high-level spiritual concepts that they read about in a book, or that they taught inside, that they learnt about in some container. You know, obviously that's preferable that you'll go and study directly with somebody and be organically initiated into something, because just being around that person's frequency will upgrade you. And so you'll start to assimilate some of their traits within your own, you know, soul's blueprint. That's exactly why we get into relationships with people, to assimilate their frequency. But unless you you know, I see this too much with people where they'll start just, you know, parroting things. And this is also the problem that I have with the scientific community, that they'll start, you know, spouting things as true because they're established scientific rhetoric, when they haven't necessarily observed that to be true in their own experience. It's just what they were told by, you know, whatever journals they read, most of which are actually funded by the pharmaceutical industry, who have already been sued multiple times for fudging data. So yeah, I do have issues with people teaching stuff that they haven't fully embodied. Okay, so that's that. So yes, quick ascension update. Obviously we are going through quite a lot of massive, intense changes right now. And a lot of people are highly concerned about, you know, the situation that's happening in kind of Eastern Europe, Russia area, and the drums of war. I'm trying to kind of keep certain words out of the video so that it doesn't get flagged, because I don't know what's being censored at the moment. Now, I'm not going to speak on the details of that because I am not a geopolitical expert on the UKR situation. So I'm not going to speak on it, and I don't think that it's my place to, and I don't think anybody should be speaking on it if they're not a geopolitical expert on that situation. My area was kind of a bit more like, it was quite well researched on kind of Iraq, Syria. That was quite close to my heart, so I spent a lot of time researching that. For those people who are worried about, you know, World War III and all of this stuff, I don't know if this is any consolation to you, but we have already been at war for a really, really long time, okay? We're not newly going into a war. We've already been at war. Like, the last 2 years was a very, very intense psychological operation against us, and we were at war. And for people who don't realize that we were at war, that's fine, you know? It's maybe ignorance is bliss, but those people are actually more likely to have fallen victim to phase 2 of the bioweapon that we were attacked with, which I spoke about in previous videos. I'm not going to go into detail right now. So we've already been at war for a long time. This is nothing new. Be mindful of the fact that, you know, wars are not just fought on battlefields. Hang on, let me refocus my camera. Yeah, wars are not just fought on battlefields. They're also fought in classrooms, in corridors, you know, in coffee shops, in Facebook chat groups and on news feeds and stuff, okay? Because one of the most effective tools of war is propaganda. And it pulls people into it, whether they're in the affected areas or not, and gets them to take sides and continue fighting, okay? It's a loosh harvesting tactic. So, you know, I'm not saying don't care about the situation. I care about the situation. I've got friends from UKR. You know, one of my roommates who I lived with in India is there at the moment. I've got lots of friends that I've modelled with who are from that country, and also from the other country, the one beginning with R. So, you know, I am concerned about everybody's safety. But I'm not going to get pulled into the divisive this versus them and who's right and who's wrong. Obviously, invading a sovereign nation is unlawful according to international law. The law is very clear about that. Okay, now obviously I understand that Mr. P has his reasons. Do I think those reasons are justifiable? Again, I'm not going to speak on it because I'm not an expert on that. But I am following it kind of loosely without getting pulled into it, without getting sucked into it, without kind of getting polarized and getting into arguments with people. I'm just not talking about it. And I advise people, unless you really feel like that is an area that you feel like, you know, you have a calling towards and you want to study and you want to kind of defend truth and, you know, all of that stuff, then by all means do you. I'm not telling people what their mission should be. But don't just care about it just because the media is telling you to care about it, because there have been loads of other wars and military, you know, countries acting militarily aggressively all over the world. Poor Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Palestine, like all of these people. There's people in all of these countries who also deserve our care and our attention. I'm not trying to be like a what about, but it does bear repeating, because I feel like, you know, the media is taking one side so heavily in this, and it's very hypocritical of them, because in all those other conflicts they justified all of those other conflicts. So that's why I'm going to say that, and I do think that it needs to be said. So if anybody is making that point and you just jump in going, oh, that's whataboutism, fuck you, like seriously fuck you, because the way the media is spinning this whole thing, it needs to be said and it needs to be repeated. So I'm just going to keep saying that. Not saying that I don't care about the people from UKR. I do. I have lots of friends from that region, so I'm going to care about all those places equally. So yeah, just try not to get pulled into it. Try not to let them feed on your loosh. Do what you can to support and, you know, send prayers and golden light if you're a grid worker to that area and other areas as well that need our help and attention. And you know, let's just pray for peace and hope that everything figures itself out soon, and focus on your own life and your mission and what you're here to do, because you're going to be much more helpful to the collective from that place than just it's being collapsed and, you know, just reading news articles and getting upset and arguing with people on Facebook and getting into arguments. Okay. What else was I going to say? Also, when it comes to news media, if you're not sure what to believe, with all news media, just take take the picture that they've used in the news article where they've said this is this happening there, get the picture, save it to your computer, do a Google reverse image search, and that will tell you whether it's fake news or not. And if the picture is not what they say it is, you can disregard the entire article as being total bullshit propaganda that is fake news and not true. So yes, that's all I have to say on that, and I hope you liked the video. And again, feel free to ask me questions. Hopefully I haven't put you all off asking questions after, you know, that, but, you know, I will answer them. I do love questions because they help me see where you guys are at and what you need help with. But yeah, just be considerate, like maybe don't ask 5 questions if you haven't watched 5 videos. So yeah. Love you and leave you. Bye.